Chronicles of Lyria. There we go.
Cool. Let me tweet this shit out. Going live.
Should be like some weird edge lord and like sharp.
Live soon.
I don't have a sword, but I can go get kitchen knife.
That's important.
Yeah.
This sharp. Yeah. Oh, let me mute.
Wait.
Yeah, you can hear us in the starting soon.
CNN at...
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so I gotta mute that.
Whoops.
So he'll Cineric through here.
We can give a preview about how much I think the old Bardic tree was dumb. It was real dumb. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, it was dumb.
The combat has me just like I kind of like the older combat.
Yeah, a little bit. I can see why
can see
staves
what
are
they're
under
doing.
pole arms. I can see why staves are under pole arms. But
Alright.
like the way you use
Alright,
the
guys.
staff versus
We
the
are
way you-
going live.
Oh,
So...
fantastic.
Boop.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yeah, I wanted to have a conversation before the show even started.
Welcome, guys. This is the first episode of
Wait.
CNN. With me is my officers from Cremoria, Joden, Nito, and Hobbs.
I gotta be
our
on the right. Oh shit, wrong side. Okay. This side.
I just want to say thank you to Niz, who has done our crazy, amazing overlay. She's been great, and it took us a while to get us this.
Wrong side, Jordan. Wrong side, Jordan.
You guys are hilarious.
No.
I don't even know what to do with you guys. Anyway,
This is
we're gonna be talking about some news in Kairos, the skill flower, and of course the Searing Plague, and our thoughts about what we know, maybe a little bit so far. So do tune in and stay with us. And I will also be looking at chat. If you have anything to say, please let us know. I've tweeted it out. Not that anyone follows my Twitter, but it's there.
No one follows your Twitter.
No, nobody follows my Twitter. So before we jump into anything, group discussions, I'm going to just talk a little about what's going on with Kairos right now. So some funny stories. We watched Gorwayne and Jax's Twitch stream. We're just talking about governments, and then they were like, "Oh man, the Kairos is kind of going a bit socialist," and we were like, "I don't think we are." And then we checked our government document, and like it hadn't been updated in like 2 years, which started us like contemplating what we wanted to do, and actually writing a government document. This kind of resulted in us losing some dukes when we were like, hey, we should have structure and actually come up with like real policy, because these people think we have policy and we kind of don't. Not that's been updated anyway. So I'm going to blame them for the reason we lost dukes, because that made us push to having a new government change. So it's all your fault. But thank you for that.
Yeah.
It made us like take a look at what we were doing wrong with Kairos and what we wanted to do with Kairos, which has resulted in some of our dukes leaving for the NA West server, and we wish them well. But there are definitely going to be a lot of changes going forward with Kairos from this point on. So look forward to that. It's definitely going to be an exciting journey for the kingdom. So that is my little spiel on the history on the events that are happening. We essentially lost, I believe, 4 dukes out of our 9. So we still have myself left in Kairos, Sicarius, Tharid, who's our king. We also have Flint, who's leading Maritimus, and Gamer Noob, who's leading Andor. So with that, what are you guys looking forward to seeing about Kairos' change? What are you wanting Kairos to be? So like, what kind of policies do you want to see going forward? We've sort of been the inactive kingdom in a way. We're not really, outside of our little bubble of Kairos Discord. We haven't really reached out to the CUA community at large. So what are you hoping that this whole new policy change and government run is going to lead to?
Who gets the first start?
You guys can fight it out in Rochambeau or Thunderdome if you like.
Rochambeau?
but I have no hands.
I
in this
win.
picture.
Okay, cool. You don't have hands. You don't,
Yeah, you don't have hands.
You have to go last.
Can I stick in a quick thing that?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Well, for viewers who might wonder, why does this third officer not seem to know as much about the game? As Cineric will attest to, I've had a pretty big family issue going on for 6 months plus, and I've just not been able to keep up. So I'm just starting to get back into things, and so we're going to rely on all of these more filled-in officers for a good chunk of this, and I'm here to just throw in a few ideas, but I'm not as brushed up on all the facts.
Thanks, Hobbs. I'm always happy to see you. You're easily, and no offense to these guys, but you're easily my favorite member of Cremoria. And even
Fuck you.
people
I'm
outside
done.
of
Nope.
outside of Cremoria, like you, like I
Two
know.
other screens go dark.
I know Morbus and others have a lot of fondness for you. There's few people who have met you who have not, so I'm happy you're here with us. Well, with that said, Nito, if you want to give us your hot take on what you're hoping for Kairos in the future.
How am I supposed to follow that up? Yeah, he's obviously the favorite. Like, okay, I haven't been around a lot before the Kairos drama, but I do have a pretty good take on leadership as a whole in large-scale organizations like the military. So I feel like a huge portion of what went wrong was, as you mentioned, the fact that we didn't have set structure and requirements for leadership, requirements for who was able to take leadership, requirements for what those leaders should be doing. And that kind of just ambiguity combined with the fact that a lot of people were being placed in positions just because they were there makes things difficult for a long-term goal, especially for any group larger. I'm just so salty right now, Box. Just especially for any group larger than, a barony. When you have a leader, especially a leader who's absent, and you don't have a strict hierarchy to follow when that leader is absent, it becomes extremely nebulous on who has what power, and that makes schisms like this considerably likely. So looking forward, we should fix those particular problems and possibly look at what we can do to bring discussions about, hey, I don't think these particular policies are good, to an open front, so we're having them clearly in front of the rest of the kingdom.
Nice. I definitely agree with that. Certainly, we had some issues where like people were in positions they shouldn't have been, and so that's stuff that we're starting to correct. And you'll see people out of positions or into new positions over the coming weeks, definitely for sure. Jordan, do you have any thoughts or feelings on the topic?
I mean, it was. I mean, I kind of agree with both you guys pretty much. It's just we didn't have any structure. We didn't know who to listen to, and the people who we could have listened to didn't really do too much, and the people who should have been listening were pushing back, and they shouldn't have, I guess. It was a lot of. There was way too many stalemates when it came to actually trying to do anything. So.
That's fair.
Yeah, not much I can add on to that. It's just. Yeah, some people were probably in positions that they shouldn't have been. There wasn't like an officially pinned message from like Jared of like, listen to so and so and so and so, and etc. So it was, hopefully things will get better. What I want.
Sounds good. Hobbs, do you have any position? I know you haven't really been keeping up on the Kairos stuff, but as probably out of all of us, the more social gamer. What sort of are you wanting to see from a community in particular?
I mean, every group needs leadership that is responsive to people. That's not just saying they'll respond when you bring something up, but that they're out there looking to see what the comments are and keep the pulse of the group they're working with. But I think for social stuff, which tends to run the risk of turning into drama, you need leaders who also know how to monitor what's going on and shut some things down when they need to be shut down.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does, definitely. For me, what I'm hoping is that we get out into the community more, which is what I'm hoping that this show will be, along with a lot of other initiatives that I and others are working on. So I hope that we interact more, so that when people ask what's Kairos or who's Kairos, um, they can then say, oh, I know them. I've seen them before. They've been interacting here and there. So I'm hoping that that's what we do from now on, is that we're no longer this isolated bubble of a kingdom, that we're in the official community, we're talking, we're introducing ourselves to people, we're helping out, and we're pitching in. So that's what I'm hoping the most out of all of this going forward. So I hope you guys see more of us in the Seaweed community, the Seaweed forums, and the Seaweed Discord going forward.
I would throw one more thing, and you can vouch for this from past groups we've been in. One other thing you need, though, isn't just pointing to the leadership. Quickest way to burn your leadership out is to have them be the only ones thinking about how to make the game more interactive and fun. You need volunteers in the group.
Yeah.
So more people have to get involved than just waiting for leadership to make something fun out of the game. And balancing things on your head apparently is a good thing to do.
Thank you very much.
Oh, guys. So we're gonna move on from there, but I just wanted to quickly go over the Kairos stuff, since I know people are gonna be talking about it, and people are already talking about it. So I figured it was worthwhile to at least give our opinions as members of Kairos on the topic. With that, the biggest thing that we can talk about is the Skill Flower, which was released like a week or two ago. So I wanted some hot takes, I suppose, from you guys on that as a thing. So specifically, what are your actual thoughts on it for that Skill Flower? And I'm gonna go with Nito again for his hot take on his thoughts on the Skill Flower in general, and then we'll dive deeper down into more of the interweb systems and things that we find interesting or novel.
Boy, first of all, we should probably address what Zalori just said. Can we possibly get an image of the Skill Flower on the stream itself for those unfamiliar?
Of course.
I can drop a link if anyone needs it.
I can do the Skill Flower image is huge, so I can't do much because it's just, oh my god, the size. But this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the Skill Flower. Let me re-up that stuff because it needs to be recached. So hold on one second.
Can you get them the copy you sent me where you can zoom in on?
Yeah, I can't link that, but if you want to link that in channel, that'd be fine. I think I have to send the link, so give me one moment.
Thank you, by the way, Serpientus.
Yeah, I have it auto-modded.
But to get this generally started, I saw a lot of good changes between the first and second tree. One of the things I kind of just have to point out is really animal lore under Bardic. I can kind of see the whole someone brought it up whenever I was talking about this to get some ideas, the snake charmer aspect, but none of the supporting skills for animal lore were under Bardic, except for maybe horticulture. So it was just one of those weird kind of off branches that didn't make a whole lot of sense at first. So I'm really glad to see that in the second iteration, it got moved with horticulture to survival, where it just fit in considerably better.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that too, and that made me very curious on why it was in Bardic. I guess it fits that sort of bard theme of always talking and singing and stuff, but definitely for survival, it certainly makes more sense there, I think, because it is dealing with nature and more than just lore and all of that. I think it's a holdover from D&D stuff or whatever.
Speaking of animal, that's all.
Okay. Joan, do you have any comments?
I do, but they're kind of unfounded without me. The rest of the game works. Obviously, I'm staring at the comment.
Of course. Is there anything in combat that you find interesting or neat or different or?
It's I see what they're doing. They're splitting it up to make it more sense for type, but sometimes it doesn't need to be that complicated, I guess. I the blunt weapons blades. I get striking. I don't know. It's again, I can't really comment on it without me knowing how the game works. We've seen a little bit of the Dark Souls sort of combat-ish. We know that there's going to be like right face combat, left face combat, but it's like I can't comment on it without me knowing how the game works.
Yeah, that's fair. It definitely seems like it's way deeper dive into combat than I would be used to from other games where there's so much differences between, say javelins and throwing blades and in stat distributions that I'm sure Nito's probably going to want to talk about a little bit.
Yeah,
but
so it's stuff like that where it's like I would comment on it, but I do that. So.
Yeah, Hobbs as again the more social person who doesn't necessarily care about combat, is the way that they're looking at doing skills, is that something that you find interesting, or something that you feel might help you do your more social gameplay?
It looks like it so far. They've got an awful lot of skills that aren't just combat oriented or aren't just even crafting. From what I understand of the way they're trying to structure the game, I think you're going to have people who could play their whole game life staying in town, interacting with the people they're selling stuff to, crafting their stuff. But those people then are going to want a fair amount of different skills to play with to make their game entertaining if they're not out there, killing creatures and conquering territories. Also, I'm hoping they have enough depth to these that you can get what we used to do in some other games, that emergent play, where you can find ways of using these skills and combining them in a way that the designers didn't even plan on. Not that you're finding a cheat, but just a different way to use it than they thought, because I think that'll add depth to it.
Yeah, I'm actually incredibly curious about certain knowledges in combination with certain skills. When they split the knowledges out, I was looking at the list that they particularly gave with things like medicine and folk remedies, and then combining that with horticulture knowledge or first aid knowledge, seeing where that would go. Another thing I saw interesting was, as far as crafting goes, I was looking at how they handled certain materials. So I'm interested to know, like, maybe someone else has a better take on this, but glass, bone, and stoneworking, I would expect bone to fall closer to woodworking as far as like how it's carved, but I'm not super sure. I've never done any bone work. So I'm curious to see like what their logic was on that.
So what I find interesting as a librarian and trained archivist, and with a little bit of background in conservation preservation, where papermaking is specifically under woodworking, that's interesting to me, because I wonder if we'll see other kinds of materials for like documents, and where would those fit with, because I mean you have, say, papyrus, or you have like vellum. Is that going to be in, say, leatherworking and tanning, or is that going to be within the same realm of woodworking, or are they just not going to do more vellum or papyrus? And then things like bookbinding, where you're making the covers of books, is that also part of papermaking, or is that part again of that cloth and leather and tanning system? Because you can have, say, leather-bound books, or definitely sort of more wood-bound books, and how you're doing the stitching. Because I can see a lot of crossover with weaving for when you're doing a bookbinding. So I am very curious on how those things are interlaced, because that's where my expertise is. Joden certainly knows his arms and armor, but I like my papers and my inks, and that's really the only things I know.
Speaking of Jotun and arms and armor, I was actually really curious on his take on staves being under polearms, specifically because I know a little bit about the area, and I'm pretty sure that staves and polearms don't tend to have similar combat styles as far as like how you handle the weapon. Oh, here it comes. I'm about to get at. I think he might be muted, or he's.
No, give me one moment. Just let me run downstairs.
Yeah, man.
Oh boy, it's about to get interesting. The reason I was bringing this up is because like I could see how physically they would be very similar, and obviously he's running downstairs probably to get a prop of some sort. probably a staff. And for shorter pole arms, a lot of stave techniques can be used. But I know a lot of like wars, as far as like actual medieval wars go, the pole arms were long enough that it wasn't really practical to use staff techniques. I may be wrong on this. I'm not as well learned as Jotun, so we're gonna find out when he gets back.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hobbs, do you have any opinions on some of the stuff? Is there like any skill that you find most interesting that you would maybe want to do in game?
Well, chances are with the character I'm planning to play, I would end up looking at different healing skills. There's both first aid, but then they had what sounded more like a physician, so not just a out in the field sort of quick bandage stuff. So
Yeah, I was really curious about that.
even setting bone as opposed to like surgery and that kind of stuff. So we'll see. I'm hoping though I have no problem playing certain skills if I find them interesting that almost everybody else says, why would you pick that? I hope they just do a good enough job at making sure they don't have some skills like I've seen in other sandboxes that have, 90 some skills in the list. That inevitably you end up with 2 or 3 that almost you're hard pressed to find anyone who's ever used that skill. So I hope that, I'm looking at something like bookbinding, but if this doesn't involve magic and you're not making spell books, what are the books used for? That
Ooh.
you'd actually have the whole skill set for.
Spreading knowledge.
Yes, what Jotun just said. I remember before on one of the earlier posts, they talked specifically about how you could get books that would reference certain styles of fighting, for example, and how those styles of fighting could be used not only for the weapon they were not only for the weapon they were intended, like for example, a longsword technique could be used for longswords, but also how if you used other weapon styles that were similar, like for example, a nudachi, which is for people who don't know, a considerably longer katana. That style could also be used for that weapon, even though it's not designed for that weapon.
Okay, good.
Similarities, if you actually look at a whole bunch of the combat manuscripts, I think I posted on the forums a little bit, there'll be styles from like a Korean martial art, a Chinese martial art, and Japanese martial art, and then you compare it to like a European martial art, there's so many ways you can cut with a single-edged blade.
Yes.
So, but to answer your previous question, quarterstaffs and pole arms and such, pole arms would use the quarterstaff as a basis for the techniques, and then they would actually do more complicated stuff. Let's see if I can get a quote. And I will first cover the quarterstaff as a basis of all long weapons, and begin by relating how each guards there are, and then teach and describe how you shall execute them in work. So, Joachim Meyer, one of the more popular fencers, because he actually has a complete system, when he's describing how to use a pole weapon, typically with the pole axes, you would usually assume that you'd use the pointy bit the whole time, but you don't. So when they're fighting, they usually fight with the butt end sometimes. They don't always swing with the heavy end.
Yeah.
So there's some relations. That's it.
I do know that pole axes are one of the shorter pole arms as far as like full scale wars go. So how would that translate to something like
Pike.
Yeah, pike or long spear?
Some of the guards, it's in general, like, say, for instance, this image. Let me see if you can see it. You see in the back, there is a pike, and in the bottom, they're using a training weapon. I mean, a halberd sort of dealio that's going on right there. You see it?
Yep.
Yeah. So some of even though they are longer, it's because it is a reach weapon, some of the techniques will continue to translate, even if it is longer.
Yeah.
So, like, if a person's far away, you're using a weapon, like, if the weapon carries certain attributes, like, say, it's a long weapon with a pointy bit, well, any weapon with a pointy bit is going to have these same techniques that's added onto it.
Good thing to look at. Makes more sense as to why they would stick that in there.
Yep.
I was actually really disappointed you didn't bring back a full staff. Like,
I got a fan. I don't want to. I keep the staves in class. I don't.
Fan greater than stave, confirmed.
Yes.
So Zalori asked, what do we think about defense having its own category instead of being under each individual category, like unarmed having its own defense subskills?
I again, I don't know how they're going to translate this into gameplay, because defense can be applied to obviously any weapon. Typically, One of the things when it comes to, again, it's a video game, so it's probably not going to happen, but IRL, when you are parrying somebody, you are striking them at the same time. So when somebody's coming at you with an attack, you actually go outside that line of attack and you parry them at the same time while potentially cutting them. So those are referred to as master cuts, or what before Jochemeyer by Lichtenauer used to refer to as the hidden cuts. Those were the techniques that would block and cut at the same time. So some of the things that would be relative would be like Wing Chun, for instance. Some of the moves involves you punching and blocking at the same time. So I am a little weirded out. I don't know why they're separated, but yeah, I don't know how the game works.
That's fair.
I could see maybe defense being more particular to things like I know on the other tree, they specifically had defense being cloak, offhand, and shields. So it may be something more like a parrying dagger, cloak and shield, or that sort of thing with a buckler or a push shield.
Yeah, but see, that's the funny thing with the parrying dagger. I've seen a lot of people actually like bend their parrying dagger by shanking somebody so hard in class.
Wow.
So it's not just for parrying. It's
Well, I mean, sure,
definitely
but
you can super stab the heck out of somebody with it.
yeah,
At the
but
same time.
I'm specifically looking at the fact that they mentioned out deflection, blocking, and shields.
Oh yeah.
Maybe
sorry.
the section they were going for was these are skills that may lead to abilities where we can focus on reducing damage. We can focus on attacking using maybe cloak binding or something similar to that, or we can focus on going forward as far as distance wise with push shield technique.
Well, maybe like they should change like deflection, for instance, from deflection to redirection.
That might work.
So
That might be something to look
like
at.
so like instead of actually like just deflecting the blow, you're more like you're setting it up for a counterattack blow. Kind of
Yeah.
idea, is what I would actually go for.
It may be more of an English problem than a design problem.
It could have been a vocabulary. Again, like I don't know what each specific thing does, so that's why I can't really critique it like an a-hole that I usually am when it comes to weapons. But you know, I can't comment without actually seeing it.
Yeah.
And that's why I default to you guys when it comes to combat and like historical things, because I know none of that. If you want to tell me like, man, how bad was Iron Gall Inc., I could be like, let me tell you a story, sir. But otherwise, I just know nothing.
I know enough to get by, and that's pretty much it. I still have to refer to Jotun pretty often, but I think I can sometimes put him on his toes.
And if I don't know, I'll tell you, and I'll quickly like cry to my teacher and be like, "What's going on? What do I do here?"
So I know Nito has some novel things that he wants to talk about. Joan, is there anything in particular before we get to Nito and his specifics that you find particularly interesting or like curious or that stand out in a weird sort of way?
No. I mean, I've commented enough on the weapons. If we want to get back to that, I can, but I'm not going to.
Okay, so Nito, do you want to give us your hot take on stuff that you find interesting?
Are you talking about the statistics spread?
Yeah,
or
the statistics spread, I believe.
Boy. Okay, so whenever you told me, hey, you have to show up on the talk show, I did my homework, obvious. Unlike some people, Jotun. So the first thing I did, obviously, is I took a look through, and something that just like stuck in my head that I could not get away from was looking at the secondary, primary, and tertiary attributes, or primary, secondary, and tertiary attributes for combat skills they gave in the image. I was looking at how like thrown weapons, primary attribute strength, secondary focus, tertiary intuition. Sure, makes some sense. I can follow that logic. But then I got to thrown blades and javelin, and I see javelins being focus, intuition, strength, and thrown blades being intuition, strength, agility, and I'm like, maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like strength and agility on strength and agility on the thrown blades might need to swap, and intuition and strength on the javelin might need to swap. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like as far as, I mean, it makes sense that intuition on thrown blades with having to know, especially for spin throwing knives of any sort, having to know the distance via kind of an intuition feel for the number of spins you're trying to go for makes sense. But I feel like finger dexterity and wrist dexterity is a lot more important than just strength for a throwing blade, versus for a javelin, you don't have as much like, I have to spin this exactly the same way each time sort of thing going on. And Jotun's already thumbing through pages, so I know I'm about to get served.
No, I don't do thrown weapons, so by all means, this is your ball game. I only do melee with blades.
I've thrown some axes. I've thrown a javelin or two. I'm not super well practiced, and I was never taught very hardcore how to do these things, so I'm not as learned up on the situation as I'd like to be before I presented any form of information in front of an audience. So if I'm wrong about anything, feel free to point it out and slam me. But as far as like spin throws for axes, spin throws for, you can't really non-spin. Spin throws for axes, spin throws for blades in general, you just, because there's only certain points within the spin that will make contact and do damage. I mean, realistically, if you get hit with the haft of an axe, it still fucking hurts. But getting hit with the blade on is the goal. So with that, the dexterity of your wrist and fingers are considerably more important. But in a javelin, it is a very, almost kind of a ham-fisted feel. Like, it's very closed. It doesn't terribly matter so much how dexterous your fingers are, how much agility you have. Obviously, it's not listed as an agility, but even intuition. The reason I can see intuition so heavily for thrown blades is because you have to know that distance. And I could see maybe intuition being useful for like, oh, I have to aim slightly ahead of them. But that's kind of a player skill, not really a character skill thing. So I'm really confused as to why strength is listed so lowly for javelins, but much higher for thrown blades in general. That was a lot of talking.
Yeah, when you pointed it out to me, I definitely like looked over because it was for me like a throwaway image. I was like, I didn't really deep dive into it too much. And then you pointed it out, and I was like, huh, that is kind of weird. So I do wonder what their intention is for javelins. I don't necessarily know anything about thrown weapons because I don't know anything really about weapons in general. But I, as a non-expert person, I'm certainly curious about it. Why they would be listed in that way for their primary, secondary, tertiary, or if that's just like here's just a throwaway image that we made to show you what our coding backend looks like for how we're doing it or not. So I really want to look forward to some more of those images of their backend and more ideas about how they're deciding like those combat skills for the primary or the secondary or the tertiary. Because it's interesting.
Immaculate Deception did mention something about there being variants per skill and there not being any formula. Do you mind giving us more of a take on like what you're trying to say? Because are you saying that there's no specific like, hey, this is going to be primary, secondary, tertiary because these things make sense, or is it just going to be, hey, we're going to randomly assign some stats?
No, it's so that there's, you don't know if tertiary is like 25% weighted, so like it accounts for like 25% of the skills for it, or if primary counts for 50% of all the skills you need, or if tertiary counts for a smaller amount. There's no, like, it could be that the primary counts for 75%, the secondary counts for 15%, and the tertiary counts for some other amount, as an example.
So what you're saying is that tertiary and secondary might not have, like, for example, the secondary might have a lower percentage input than a tertiary, even though it's listed as tertiary.
I generally not, but they basically said that there's no like how much it's weighted. Like secondary can be a very small margin. That could be primary is like 95%, and then secondary is like 3%, and tertiary is 2%. They could not matter. They could matter a lot.
Okay, got you. But I mean, even then, the point does still stand as to why, even if secondary and tertiary don't matter all that terribly much, it does beg the question why they would put that in tertiary versus the given second. Like, that is still something to look at, even if those stats aren't percentile as important as, hey, primary attribute for javelins is focus. You got to have all the focus.
Yeah. So yeah, secondary should always generally come before tertiary. I couldn't imagine a world scenario where that would be not the case, but it can be very, very varied. But yeah, definitely for sure for the way that they're aligning those stats on that image, really makes me curious. And with that, we'll move on. Unless anyone has any other hot takes they want to give for the skill flower to a bit about the plague. We don't really know much, and a lot of it's unofficial, but I still feel it's worth like talking about as in a general sense. Especially with Hobbs here, 'cause I think out of all the people, I'm really curious on what Hobbs thinks of these sorts of things. Given the way that Hobbs plays video games has always astounded me for the 5+ years that I've known him. So moving on, we don't know much about it, and I'm not going to like go into what they've said because they've already said that it's changed quite a bit. But sort of, what would you like to see from the event? For something that's this big community-wide project that's gonna last for like a good 6 weeks. What kind of stuff would you like to see ultimately from this kind of event? And Hobbs, I'm gonna go to you for this since you're the person that does a lot more community work than I think any of us on this show. So, like, what sort of things would you like to see from a big community-based event?
Well, for this big community-based event, besides what you've given to me in the last couple of days, I don't know that much about it. I mean, yeah, I don't know that much about the details, and it sounds like something people are... Well, I don't know. I'm not even going to speculate. Do you want to give a rough idea of what the event is? So
sure, yeah, I'll give a rough idea, and then you can tell me like how would you like it to sort of play out. So the rough idea that we have from what Caspian has said is that people with pledge packages will be considered the pure, and that they'll generate some amount of pure tokens, and the people without pledge packages will generate some amount of plague tokens, and that there will be a coordinated exchange of those two to get rid of the plague. Otherwise, there will be like a bar that will be going up, like tracking an outbreak meter. If anyone has played like the board game Pandemic, that's immediately what I think of. And essentially, it's the community working together to make sure that those that don't have pledge packages are getting cured, so that this plague outbreak doesn't happen, and that there will be some level of an impact, not just on as a community event or any rewards, but that there will be some impact on the entirety of the world storyline. So the lore of the world, possibly what the map might look like to some extent, or what the starting tribes might have, or some other thing we don't know. But it'll have some effect on Chronicles of Valyria as a whole from the way us as players play this game.
Okay. I don't know. It sounds more like a way to try to get people who aren't pledged to pledge.
Mm-hmm. But is there anything that you would like to see, like community activity, that you would want to have happen at all? For like how they talk to one another or anything like that? Because again, this is, like I said, this is like affecting the world story. I know you're big on like having these sort of immersive moments of lore and story and shared things.
I guess to some extent I'd have to say, but in this case, what they're doing and creating seems, I don't know, like it has an alternative purpose, and it's not really for a game that won't be out for a year plus. I don't know. This doesn't. When you say you have all this experience in community building stuff, but this isn't the kind of thing I'm used to.
That's fair. Jordan or Nito, do you have any like comments on just this event, like as a general idea?
Jordan, if you don't have anything, I do. I have a little bit.
I mean, as for you, when I've said it's probably the best way for me to actually get friends into it for free. I don't know how it will apply lore-wise. I don't know too much about the lore. I probably know the least compared to all of you guys. But I think this is a good idea on getting friends to join just by being active in forums. Seeing how this game is so reliant on forums and people actually working together, getting your friends to just communicate seems like a very base idea on how to gauge what their activity levels are. So, about it.
What do you want to say?
I know Sir Pianis is here, and if he wants to steal my ideas, give me some credit. But I know what I would look for in this type of event is 2 separate win conditions. So we have a situation where we have people who are part of the game already, people who are already invested, pushing these tokens, these pure tokens, in an attempt to cure the plagued. However, I would also like to see a situation in which the plagued could get something other than possibly like a copy of the game or make an impact beyond that sort of thing by actually beating out the pure and causing the plague to happen. For example, if the plague is beaten, obviously a lot of people are going to get free packs. That's fantastic. In fact, that's going to be huge because it gives a lot of lower tier players who barons always need citizens, counties always need citizens, duchies always need citizens. However, if the plague wins, how is that going to affect the world? We can look at things like, hey, maybe the NPC population won't be as big at start because we just recently had this huge plague. And to give people who didn't have a pack at the time a way to get into the game still, even though they purposely tried to cause this plague to happen, you could have maybe like a sale in which there is a pack you can get that is a plagued citizen pack where you get a copy of the game, but you might have some specialty items or some interesting medicines or some potions or something that would be useful in game, but wouldn't have necessarily a huge impact, but something flavorful and interesting, something like you can really put your hands on. You could also look at things like how this would affect the landscape. Maybe this plague doesn't just affect human or man. Maybe this plague could affect some animal. We could see, hey, if the plagued win, all the cure that were originally plagued don't just get a pack; they also get a plagued animal as like their animal companion. And it'd be like maybe the conifer rats, maybe a sick conifer rat, and it could have like a special debuff / buff thing. I feel like having a reason to support the plague would not necessarily be a bad idea. Now, I do believe that supporting the pure should be the goal, simply because we all need citizens, to be real. But maybe having it where it's split out, where there's a way to still recruit, but also have this really interesting kind of plague scenario happen, if people wanted that sort of thing, could be interesting.
Yeah, that's actually a really good thought and idea, Nito, is to have those extra win conditions. That way it doesn't feel like it's just us versus like people who don't know any better, or maybe it gives more reason for people to want to participate as the plagued because there's some cool extra thing for them. Obviously, we don't know anything about what the plagued or pure get, or what the extra bonus is besides maybe some plagued get free packages. But other than that, we don't really have a good idea. But I'm very curious to see what it's going to be, and I really do hope that it would be that where there's like some reason why the plagued would want to spread the plague would be, I think, a neat little touch. So my big question to you guys, as our last sort of question, before we just do our sign-outs and all that, is do you want to see more of these kind of big community events from SBS? And what do you think of community events that can shape lore in impactful ways? Are you a fan of that, or would you rather it to be more like the Conquest, where they're not really impacting it, but they're still a community event? Or would you actually want more of these events where we have some hand in shaping the world ourselves, more than just free stuff?
Having one-of-a-kind ramifications that you could have taken part in, and you being able to tell that story later on, I think stuff like that would be pretty. I want more stuff like that. Again, I don't know too much about the lore, but actually saying that I participated in an event that actually affected the future of the game, and you see the physical ramifications of it in the game somehow later on, I think that's neat. like actually like pointing out, hey, don't go to that village over there. That's thing had to plague for like 400 years, and it's super infected because we couldn't fix it fast enough. That'd be pretty neat.
Fuck those guys.
So
Yeah,
sort
screw those guys.
so sort of like an Undercity in WoW, where just like, oh god, just this is the worst place ever. We can't fix it.
Yeah, but you could have fixed it. Was the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nita, do you have any comments or hobs on sort of? Do you want to see more of these events, and what do you think of lore events?
Well, and for those who have an interest in lore, even if there's not any specific game application to it, I remember back in like Ultima Online, where if you went to a library, the library bookshelves actually had pre-made books with history that the game designers were sneaking into the game, and you even had people would go around and make copies of those so they could put it in their own library and have the history that went or the lore that went with the game. If you could end up with certain people or groups from this event that get locked in the history of the game somehow and stuck into the world when it starts, that would be pretty cool to have your personal name or group just out there in the world, and it wasn't because you did it, it's because of something that happened before the game even started.
Yeah, for sure. Nito, do you have any opinions before I just give mine?
As far as like different lore events goes, I would love to be able to every week ago. So whenever they release, hey, we did this new thing with combat. Have a little like mini game or event, something to like draw people in and get their attention and be like, hey, even if it's just a poll, what do you think about this? Like something, okay, maybe something more interactive. Polls, but just something a little interactive to go with new large releases on information would be interesting. Like, for example, if they did a release, shut up, Jordan. If they did a release on religious lore, maybe have like a little God versus God thing going on, where when you sign in, you have this option to put faith in one of the gods, and highest tiers do yada yada yada. Even if it doesn't have any real in-game benefits, just having a reason to participate would be kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. I've always been a pretty big advocate of more of these big events because I think it gets the community to rally around some idea or something rather than either staying in their bubble. It gets more of us outside of our bubbles, talking in the COE communities, talking in the COE forums. We get to meet new people, coordinate with new people that we wouldn't have. Even for Conquest, which was admittedly not very fun for most people to play it. You know, we were talking with Boardwall a lot, we were talking with Blackheart a lot, and in general, we don't really reach out to kingdoms on our own server, let alone kingdoms on other servers. So we hadn't really met other community members, and other community members haven't really met us. So for me, a lot of these events bring the community together in ways that normally they wouldn't. And I would love to see that more because I think it gets people talking in the CW Discord, it gets people hyped about it, it gets people going out to Facebooks or the social medias or anything else talking about all these cool events of pulling in new people and new blood, because it's something to talk about, something to do, something for people to have their hands on while the game is still in development where we can't really play it. These little things I think are really great for that. And I would definitely love to see more of these lower events, even if they're small, even if they are really precise to where it's like just a small area or a small idea, or even just a small item, not necessarily with any real benefits, but like just where we can sort of have some direct contact with the world lore and have some little change to it. I think is novel from other games, and I would really love to see them push that idea more, to really show how COE is this real different game where not only are we writing lore, but we're playing these games that affect all of us. We're cooperating or not constantly, and I think that's what for me COE stands out the most for is having those events. So definitely for sure, have more of those, Serp, all the time, always, please, if you can, because they are fun and it gets all of us engaged and hyped for the game when we would otherwise be in a lull. I'm
still really sad I missed that one color of the year because I I was at boot camp when it happened.
Oh
I
yeah,
was like, the one color I wanted.
for
The one color I missed.
for the big
Yeah.
Salix wins where we won 3 times in a row and declared it a three-peat. That was great. And again, for the conquest stuff, we couldn't have done without board, so I just want to reiterate that. All the times that Kairos participated in conquest, we didn't win it alone. Board had helped us the whole way through, and they are amazing people and awesome. So thank you always to Board for helping us out, and we're helping them or they're helping us with another event, with the Searing Plague event. They're running a cool little competition, and we're joining in on that, so that should be fun. So yeah, is there any closing comments that you guys want to say for our maiden episode 1 live stream of CNN?
Clues.
What
Was the
Is there-
comments?
Is there any comments or anything that you want to say? Closing comments, Nito, that you want to say before we?
Okay.
Yes,
I'm deaf. I'm sorry.
it's okay. I speak too fast and definitely need to work on that.
I don't know. I'm just excited for the future. There's a couple things I'm really excited to participate in. I'm really excited for the Plague event, and I'm very, very excited to possibly get more combat information, Serbiantis. Just come on, man. It's been a while. I want a little bit more.
Joan, you got anything you want to specifically say?
I'll reiterate that. Yeah, Plague event, yes. Combat info. Come on, man. Wait, hasn't it been it's supposed to be last year in spring we were supposed to... I'm sorry. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been waiting on combat. I remember...
I can understand why. It's game development's hell. I'm just giving shit. I just want more info is all.
Yeah, I remember Combat was one of the dev journals that, when we were still part of PAX way back when, that was the one thing that we were, waiting on before we were getting more involved in the game, and then, it just never materialized. So we're we can't wait any longer. We gotta get in now, so we might as well. And then, Combat's the one thing that I think all of us have been waiting on.
I mean, I could see why, because, didn't they... God, what was that one engine that was in the background that they decided not to use? The one that's supposed to be, the nodal-based servers?
The Spatial OS, are you talking about?
Yeah, didn't they say that they were going to stop using the Spatial OS servers?
Or
something like that?
Yeah, I don't know if there were servers, but it was, the software.
Systems.
Yeah.
And because of that, data packets and all that crap, they don't know how much, detail they can put in the combat, so they're probably still... So, I mean, there's obviously reasons why we don't.
Yeah, I think their pivot probably definitely moved their timeline up from when they could have done combat. They had to do more back-end stuff to get off of Spatial OS's back-end and make their own.
Yeah.
So, for sure, that definitely changed the timeline.
Yeah.
Hobbs, do you have anything that you want to say?
No, thanks.
All right, fair enough. Thank you all for tuning in. And thank you, Joe, Nito, and Hobbs for being here for our first show. This will be a weekly show. It'll be every Sunday at 6 p.m. EST, EDT, whatever nonsense. I don't like daylight savings time. It sucks. So at 6 p.m. I'll generally post it in the COE, community board. And if you want to come and join Cremoria and chat with us, we're all cool people. You're welcome to hang out and join us on our Discords. You can find us on the COE forums and join us that way. I believe also in the panel below, you can click on that link. I'll copy-paste that link for however it works, and come join us in chat. New York time, but New York is not the only thing that's in EST box. But I am definitely a New Yorker, so. Thank you all, and once more again to Niz. She designed this entire overlay. All the things that you're seeing here are from Niz. She deserves all of the money in the world, because she is just an amazing artist. And we could not have done the stream in the way that we did without her work. So thank you again, Niz. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next Sunday. So if you like this content, then please do follow. And I hope to all see you next time. So have a good night, guys.
Night.